For today's episode, I'm going to do a quick run through the AFC. We'll hit on a few points for each team based on these first 2 weeks of the 2024 season. Recording this prior to the Atlanta-Philadelphia Monday night game, so we'll hit on the NFC tomorrow once we have all the teams in the conference finished with week 2. Simple format here. Basically going to start with the AFC North and go clockwise. I think we'll do the same tomorrow with the NFC divisions. So for today, AFC North, East, South, and finish with the West. Start with the Steelers. They just need competent quarterback play. And that's why they got Wilson and Fields. Signature Steelers wins in weeks 1 and 2. They have 2 wins and 1 touchdown at this point. Defense is in typical form. They suffocated Atlanta. And let's be honest, Bo Nix never had a chance against that team. If this defense stays healthy, it could go down as one of the best ever. Now, it's early, but they're on pace for yet another winning season under Mike Tomlin. Ravens, surprising 0-2 start. Now, week 1, Isaiah Likely was a close call, but how do you lose to the Raiders at home after having a double-digit lead? It doesn't matter if you are, better than the Steelers. You are already 2 games behind. How does that happen? And is Mark Andrews ever going to be the same player? It really seems like Likely is the guy, at least at the tight end position, who, is going to be the go-to. In terms of the overall pass game, Zay Flowers looks like, that's who the pass game is going to run through. A lot of targets through weeks 1 and 2. Obviously, much better game, week 2 than we saw against the Chiefs. But it seems pretty obvious that he is going to be the guy they feature in the passing game. And I think Derrick Henry is a good fit. Just in terms of play style, I think he fits in really well with, what we typically associate, the Ravens organization to be. But I wouldn't expect, to see prime Henry. Certainly not the guy that, we saw with Tennessee in his best years. The Bengals are off to another slow start under Zach Taylor. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. We've seen this before. But how sustainable is it? It's the NFL. You cannot continue to, lose games early in the season and then just expect that you are, going to figure it out and ultimately become, a playoff team and contender in the AFC. I think the offense is limited when they are missing T. Higgins. And I think they're going to miss Joe Mixon much more as the season goes on. That was a bad loss in week 1 to the Patriots. Now, the defense bounced back in a big way at Kansas City. I thought they played really well. They forced 2 Patrick Mahomes turnovers. But, I do think it was the right call on the pass interference. It sucks to end the game that way. And I'd like to see the competition committee, take a look at, is defensive pass interference, should it continue to be a spot foul or, like in the college game, right, 15 yards, right? There has to be a middle ground, especially because it's a subjective call. And then the chase, that 15-yard penalty, that changed the complexion of the game. I know they ultimately still got the field goal on the drive. I question if he is in a good frame of mind, and you have to wonder, when he blows up like that, is that somehow related to or a cumulative effect of the frustration with the contract or lack thereof, a new contract? With the Browns, my opinion has not changed through the first 2 weeks. I said back in the summer that they have a great roster, but the quarterback is limiting them. Nothing through the first 2 weeks disproves that. That first drive against Jacksonville was impressive. I will give them that. But the first drive is largely scripted. And then they did nothing the rest of the game. They had that first drive was their only touchdown of the day. Now, the defense was shaky against the Cowboys, but I think what we saw against the Jaguars is much more representative of what that unit will look like throughout the season. Offensively, they need to get Amari Cooper going. I know there were, a couple in both weeks 1 and 2 where, he should have brought it in, and they just don't seem to have a rhythm with him. They should win the week 3 Giants game by double digits. They're just too talented, in my opinion. But they have to establish a vertical passing game. If they can't do that against the Giants defense, when is it coming? They're on year 3 with Watson. You play in the AFC North. This has to get better. Moving over to the AFC East, the Patriots look pretty much like what we expected. They play sound defense. A lot of Ramondre Stevenson on offense. Don't expect a lot of big plays down the field. Jacoby Brissett is not going to turn the ball over, but he's also not going to take a ton of risks. He's actually not thrown an interception since 2022 when he was the Browns starter during the Watson suspension. I believe they will play hard and they'll be competitive in more games than not. They just do not have the offensive firepower to be a playoff team. I do think they'll get some things cleaned up, right? That blown assignment on DK Metcalf on Sunday, I think that will be eliminated. Mayo is a good coach, but they need to build out this roster, right? And they really need Drake May to be good if they are going to have any shot moving forward. The Dolphins, obviously, scary situation with Tua. Head trauma is about as serious as any injury you can sustain. At the moment, indications seem to be he plans to come back at some point. When that may be, I guess we'll know more in the coming weeks. I don't think Skylar Thompson is going to bomb in the fill-in duty. I really don't. Now, he's obviously not as good as Tua, but he's been in the offense long enough to know what he's doing, and I think he's going to surprise some people with his play. And he has no shortage of weapons either, right? It's not the worst situation to step into as a backup. Now, the offense has just looked a little off this year. Week 1 and even before Tua went out on Thursday night, they needed a 80-yard Tyreek Hill touchdown and game-saving punch-out by Javon Holland on ETN at the goal line there just to get by Jacksonville. So a lot of work to do there, but confident Mike McDaniel will figure that out, even with the backup quarterback. But they really need the chunk plays like we saw in 2022 and 2023. Bills seem to be more well-rounded than in years past. This year, no Gabe Davis, no Stephon Diggs, but no problem. James Cook, last Thursday night, really flashed what he can do. And the other thing that the Bills get credit for is that week 1 win was typical, kind of what we've seen the past few years. They needed Josh Allen to be Superman and take over. But then in week 2, they basically won with the supporting cast. And let's be real, they dominated Miami. Tua or no Tua, the Dolphins were never in that game. The Jets, to say the least, did not look good against San Francisco. Now, the 49ers have a great defense, but you cannot be that bad. They weren't not much better against Tennessee, but it did look like they figured something out, at least on the ground. Breece Hall is a major weapon. Braylon Allen looks like he's also going to contribute, but they must be able to have a consistent rushing attack, if they are going to have any chance at stacking wins. They also need to get Garrett Wilson much more involved. I suspect that will be a point of emphasis. They also need to protect Aaron Rodgers. But to me, the biggest shock in the first 2 weeks was the defense. Now, they played better against Tennessee, but you cannot, under any circumstance, get run over the way they did against the 49ers, especially when they had no Christian McCaffrey. They made Jordan Mason look like, an all-timer. It's like, man, is that Emmitt Smith out there? I mean, that guy just thrashed them in week 1. And then in week 2, it still came down to a 4th down pass breakup at the goal line against a Will Levis-led offense. So I expect the Jets will clean it up on defense. If they don't, I don't see how this season goes much better than last season, even with a healthy Aaron Rodgers. Moving into the AFC South, Will Levis, woof. I mean, horrendous decision making. You're going to play yourself out of a job. The Miami game last year and the DeAndre Hopkins, 3 touchdown game, that is not going to carry you if you play like this. Their offense is obviously struggling. Now, I will give him credit. That was an amazing throw to Calvin Ridley against the Jets where, the guy put it in the perfect spot. Ridley scores the touchdown somehow. I thought that ball was going to get picked off, yet somehow Calvin Ridley comes down with that and they get the 6. But look, they are not going to win a lot of games if 20 is their scoring ceiling. If the offense does not improve, Levis is not the long-term guy. For the Jaguars, the game against Miami that went from really what was shaping up to be the road upset of the day in week 1 turned into losing on a last-second field goal. I think that is going to follow them this year. Now, I still maintain Trevor Lawrence is one of the most talented young quarterbacks, but at some point here, you need to translate that talent onto the field and in the form of showing consistent results. It's why I said earlier this summer, what's the rush on his contract extension? I'm not at all suggesting that they move on from him. As I said, he is a huge talent. I really think he could become a top 10 quarterback, but you could have charted that development path for at least one more year before you committed $250 million to the guy. Travis Etienne, he looks a little bit lighter this year. Now, he's obviously, he's not a big bruiser by any stretch, but I thought he looked bigger the past couple of seasons. He's always had that power, just he looked thicker the last couple of years, and at least this year, I don't know if it was the colorways or, maybe the way the uni is fitting, but he just looks a little bit slighter out there. Silver lining for the Jags, I think Brian Thomas is a huge addition. That guy looks like he is going to easily surpass 1,000 yards if he stays healthy. And then the Colts, I'm extremely impressed with the superpowers that Anthony Richardson has flashed in his limited action so far. You cannot deny how much ability that guy has. But let's maybe take a breather on the predictions. They're currently 0-2, and he's completing 49% of his passes. He's thrown 4 interceptions already. Now, they do have some nice weapons on the outside, and I think with time, it should gel. Shane Steichen is a great offensive mind. But through the first couple weeks, every time I look up, Richardson seems to be launching a ball over A.D. Mitchell's head. How many times has that guy been wide open only for them not to connect? Texans, they look awesome. They picked up right where they left off last season. C.J. Stroud is showing no indications of a sophomore slump. The receiving core is loaded. Joe Mixon looks like he's going to be a huge factor in that offense. Now, he left early with the injury last night. Doesn't seem like it's going to be anything long-term, but we'll have to monitor that situation. And then the defense, they've looked solid through 2 weeks. And DeMeco Ryans is only in his second year, but he really seems to have this thing figured out in terms of being a head coach and leading a team. It's a captain obvious pick here, but the Texans should easily win this division. Going out west, the Chargers have quickly assumed the identity of a Jim Harbaugh-led team. They're 2-0. Big test against a stingy Pittsburgh Steelers defense coming up this Sunday. It will be their second straight road game. They're actually going to be staying on the East Coast after just destroying Carolina yesterday. It will be interesting to see how that offense looks on the road in the Steel City. The one thing I did notice in terms of the passing game is more of an effort to get Quentin Johnston involved, at least early, through these first couple of weeks. We'll see how that plays out the remainder of the season. He kind of fits that mold of the big body type wide receiver we've seen have success in Jim Harbaugh offenses. I'm thinking Anquan Bolden back in the 49ers days, Nico Collins at Michigan, right? And obviously Nico is currently having a ton of success with Houston. With the Raiders, hell of a win on the road in Baltimore. They trailed by 10 late, and somehow they pull out the win. Definitely the big surprise in that early window yesterday. And let's be real. Their two best players carried them to victory. Devontae Adams, Max Crosby. Now, Christian Wilkins was a big-time addition in free agency. And Gardner Minshew, good stats so far, but he's still Gardner Minshew, so let's see how this thing goes. The ground game just doesn't seem to be there for them. They are a far cry from, having Josh Jacobs, and certainly 2022 when Jacobs led the league in rushing. Denver Broncos, look, I just think they're going to struggle this season. They just are. Bo Nix should have went day 2, day 3. I don't see it. But Sean Payton clearly thinks he does. So, I guess we'll need to give it time. But they are just extremely limited with the salary cap because of that Russell Wilson deal. And, right now you got a young quarterback. He doesn't look great, but they also lack explosive playmakers on that offense. Now, the defense looked okay yesterday, but it's the Steelers, right? As good as that Steelers defense is, that offense is also extremely limited. So hard to gauge the Broncos defense, against that team. I don't think right now, though, that the Broncos could beat the Raiders. And so I think that translates to Denver is headed toward a last place finish in 2024. Chiefs, obviously a crazy game in that opener, was very entertaining to watch. Xavier Worthy in this offense is very intriguing. He was quiet yesterday, but I would say just wait until they really start to deploy him in a larger role. Obviously tough to lose Isaiah Pacheco. I think that is going to force Andy Reid to really change the approach on offense. Lots of Carson Steele stands out there, but I would say you're more likely to see more of Samaje Perine and some sort of a short pass game or extended run game worked in. Carson Steele will get his snaps, don't get me wrong, but do not expect the Pacheco workload to just shift over entirely to him. I also think getting Kelsey involved is an absolute must, especially now with Pacheco out and scheduled to miss multiple games going on IR. Patrick Mahomes needs to play with more consistency. Now, he's Patrick Mahomes, so I don't think that will be a problem. But some of these mistakes in weeks 1 and 2 very easily could have resulted in a loss. So look for him to clean that up. But they're back-to-back champs for a reason, and until someone knocks them off, they remain the favorites. All right, that covers the AFC through week 2. Again, we'll cycle through the NFC tomorrow. Enjoy the Monday night game. Thanks for listening.